New episode of the Sean Wimmer podcast. Thanks for tuning in, recording this early on a Tuesday morning. I'm just looking at the video. We've got video for the podcast now. It's over on the YouTube page. If you do not have the link to the YouTube, it is on my social medias. Whenever I post about a podcast, I'll post the link to the YouTube. And I am looking, my beard is getting pretty long to the point where it's almost at the length where it will be the longest it's ever been. And I'm trying to figure out if I like it or not. And so I just got distracted as I started the podcast going, when to shave the beard. It is always the hard thing to do is shaving a beard. If you've had a beard, you understand it. It gets to a point where it gets just annoying. It gets food in it every time you're eating, especially when you're eating sloppily. It just gets a little uncomfortable. It can get scratchy. It can get in your mouth a little bit. It can get annoying. And it's hard to just shave it because it is an extension of your body. And for someone like me who can only grow hair on their face, in terms of trying to do cool hair stuff, that's all I've got. That's all I've got. I can't do a cool haircut ever again. I can just do a beard. And so, unlike I ever had a cool haircut in the first place. So when you shave it, there's this feeling of regret that just hits you immediately. And I don't want that feeling of regret, but also I'm kind of ready to shave the beard. So all of this to say, there's video of the podcast, and I was just watching it to make sure it was working, and I realized, oh man, we are getting to that point where I'm going to have to make that decision to go out to the garage with the clippers, just shave it off without thinking, and then come back into the house and go on with life and see how and just live with the depression for a day or two. Now, I will probably shave this one into a mustache for a couple days. Next week, my wife is out of town with my daughter. So I've got the house to myself for about 5 days. And I think that might be a good mustache time because that's when, as a married man, you can have a mustache on those days where nobody sees you. That is fair. The next day, you better have it gone, or else things get a little shaky in the home department. Anyways, let's get into today's podcast. So last week, I have a little story for you from last week. So last Thursday morning, I woke up with the thing that in the last 365 days, you're not allowed to be. I woke up last Thursday morning with the front of my forehead throbbing and a little bit of a tingle in the back of my throat. And I, for as long as I can remember in my life, have had around this time every year, because it always coincides with the WCC tournament, always, I've had the same weird sickness where I just get a real bad sore throat, cold, a little bit of a cough, but major sinus headache, and it's just brutal. And sometimes it gets serious where it gets a big fever, and sometimes it doesn't. In fact, one time I went to the NCAA tournament, and Jay and Kevin show, we went down to the NCAA tournament, or we went to the WCC tournament, in Vegas. I didn't leave my room. I shared a room with Jay. I don't know how he did this. He had to just hate it. I shared a room with Jay, and I was in the room the entire week minus the Gonzaga games, where I should not have really been. Looking back, I should not have been going to the games because I was sick as a dog, and no one needs to be spreading a kind of sickness. But I would go to the games, I'd do the morning show, and then the rest of the day I would sleep in my hotel. I wouldn't do anything at night. I just sleep in the hotel. That's it. That's all I did. And it was brutal. But this sickness comes every time around this year. And so I start to feel it. But this is not a regular year. This is still in the midst of COVID. And I tell myself, I know my body. I know this sickness. I don't have COVID. How many people have said that? I don't have COVID. So I go through Thursday. I'm not feeling good. Friday, I wake up. Headache is just brutal. Head is just pounding. And throat's a little sore. Nose is a little more runny. And I'm like, I know I don't have COVID, but I want to be the responsible person. I need to go get a COVID test. I need to go get a COVID test because I don't want to be a spreader of COVID. And the weekends here where we meet up with people and we do stuff with people, and I don't want to do that if I've got COVID, even though I know I don't. Right? So I go on Friday to I first of all I never got a COVID test, so I'm googling where to get a COVID test, and there's all these options that come up, and one of them is urgent care, and it says you don't need an appointment. So I go to our urgent care here in Spokane on the South Hill, and I walk in, and the nice gals behind the counter are like, "Oh, what brings you in?" And what am I going to say? I say, "Hey, I hear you guys do COVID tests, and I'm here to get one." And I will say, even though they probably have given 1 million of these, they did the thing where they kind of looked at me like, and jumped back a bit, like I was cursed. And they immediately started kind of fumbling around, and they're like, well, you have to go online and take this quick survey, and then that will tell you whether or not you need to get a COVID test. And I'm like, whatever. And place is empty. I'm like, okay, this is fine. So I go back out to my car, and this thing you had to fill out, which is like, what symptoms do you have? And then that will decide whether or not you can get a COVID test, which if I really wanted to just be a bum, I could have just filled out all the things I know are COVID related, and they would have done that. But I answered all of the things truthfully, and it's like, okay, what do you got? I've got a headache. I've got a little bit of a sore throat. Nose is running a little bit. No fever. But, I'm running through all of this. While I'm filling this doggone thing out, 4 different groups of people. Now, it took me maybe 6 to 10 minutes to fill this thing out online. 4 different groups of people have entered the urgent care. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4. There's about 8 to 10 people now in the urgent care, which I had just walked out of with 0. So I finished filling this thing out, and sure enough, about 3 minutes after I fill it out, it's been about 10 to 12 minutes now, I get an email that says, hey, you have been approved for a COVID test. Just walk into any of these urgent cares, and they will give you a COVID test. I go, okay. So I head back in, and I'm thinking, okay, I was just in here. Maybe I'm front of the line. Maybe they'll put me in first. It's a COVID test. I hear they're quick. So I go in. The lady goes, okay, well, it'll be about an hour. Excuse me? Because all these people came in. She's nice. She goes, okay, well, you can always go to any of the urgent care places. So maybe try one of the other ones. I go, okay. So I drive out to a different location, and there is no one in it. So I'm very thankful. No one in it. So I walk in, and at this point now, I've had enough time after filling out the paperwork to start to question how well I know my body. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't have COVID, but do I have COVID? And I walk into this urgent care, and now, my brain is starting to teeter a little bit. So super nice gal gets my information in, takes me to the back room, and one of their little waiting room, or not waiting rooms, but they're hospital rooms. I don't know what they're called, urgent care rooms. And she takes my vitals. She says everything's good, no fever, blood pressure is good, pulse is good, a little bit overweight. And I'm like, okay, we're doing this. This is happening. So this takes a little bit of time, and then she leaves. She goes, there will be a physician to come in to see you. I go, okay. The person who works, the physician who works here. And she leaves. And I then sit in this room for 25 minutes. 25 minutes just sitting in this room. And I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And I'm not doing anything on my phone. I could have watched an entire episode of a show, because at any moment the doctor could come in, and I want to look professional here. So finally the doctor comes in, and he's like, oh, what brings you in? And I'm like, COVID brings me in. He goes, oh. And so does anything good ever bring anyone? Does anyone ever bring anything good into the urgent care? It's like, what brings you in? Oh, I'm here to tell you that you want a car. That's why I've been sitting here quietly for the last 25 minutes. He talks to me a little bit. He's like, okay, what's your symptoms? I talked to him about it. He's like, okay, blah, 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 blah. It could be COVID. It could be this. It could be that. I go, okay. And then he goes, okay, so here's the deal. I'm going to prescribe you something to maybe, take away the headache and maybe some of the inflammation in your throat. It's not even a prescription. He's like, here's some over-the-counter stuff that you can get that will help with those things. I go, okay, that's great. And then we will get a hold of you on Sunday or Monday with your test results. And he starts to leave the room, and I go, raise my hand. Excuse me, sir. Was the forehead scan the COVID test? Because how does the COVID test work? And he goes, oh, no, it was the swabs. The swabs do it. I never got swabbed. I haven't done that part of this test yet. And he looks like a train has hit his brain. Like it's totally discombobulated everything. He goes, well, they were, what? They're supposed to do that a while ago. No, man, they didn't. So now we've got a situation where he realizes I've just been sitting in this room for a very long time with nothing. And he has to go approach someone to say, hey, this guy needs a COVID test. So 15 minutes later, the lady came back in, again, super nice, and sticks the thing up my nose, sticks the thing in my throat, and I leave. And now when I leave, I now believe I have COVID because I've now taken the test. And as well as I know my body, I'm now convincing myself the other way that I have COVID. So Friday night, we lay low. Saturday all day, we lay low. And Sunday, we're waiting the test results. And I'm telling you, Saturday went by pretty smooth. I rested a bunch on Saturday. We just stayed in the house and hung out. And then Sunday morning, time's just ticking forever because I know in my head I don't have COVID. I've had this sickness a million times. I know this sickness. I know me. And that stinking phone rings, and I see the number that is the doctor's office, and I missed call. I missed the call. It had been ringing in my pocket. I miss it. And so I go to voicemail. It goes to voicemail, and the voicemail is like, oh, we've got your results. You can get them online. I go, okay. So I log on. I'm figuring out how to log into this site. It's taking me forever because I've got to remember my password and do all this stuff and log in. Negative COVID test. I'm proud to say I am one of the few who got regular sick during a global pandemic because I don't feel like you hear a lot of those stories. I feel like everyone who's been sick has COVID. I'm proud to say you can still get sick during COVID and not have COVID. So I actually had a regular, good old-fashioned mini cold, cough, sinus headache in the middle of the global pandemic without getting the global pandemic. So it happened. That was my entire weekend. It's why I don't really have a whole lot of stories for you today. So I don't have a whole lot of anything. I slept a bunch this weekend. And then Sunday I was feeling good as gold. Sunday I was feeling good as gold. Yesterday felt amazing. And today I feel great again. So it was just a quick 48-hour bad boy. And the great father that I am, I passed it on to my daughter. And so now I get to live with the fact that I made my daughter sick. And I've never had that feeling before, and it freaking sucks. And I now, more than ever, more than what COVID taught me, more than any of that stuff, more than what I learned as a kid, I've never wanted to keep my hands cleaner. I've never wanted to make sure everything is clean around me more than I do now. Because I never want to give my daughter anything that makes her nose run ever again, because it is a awful feeling looking at your child who is sick and just kind of looking at you with glassed over eyes, nose running, wondering, why am I feeling this way? Dad, why am I feeling this way? And the answer is because of me. I made you sick because I hung out with you this weekend and decided that it was still a great idea to play toys with you and read books to you and be close to you because I am above giving you a sickness. So terrible dad move. Very thankful that I do not have COVID, but very unthankful that through all of this, the lesson that I will take away is don't get your freaking kids sick. It's not good. Be smarter than that. So I learned a dad thing this weekend. Okay, that's it for the podcast today. Thank you for tuning in. Hey, if you like the podcast, I would love it if you hit the review button over on iTunes. We are getting close to being within 30 reviews from 100. My goal is 100 reviews in the podcast by the end of the year. It's just a personal goal of mine. It is what it is. So if you want to help out with it, that would be sweet. I would love it. Hit me up on Twitter at Sean T. Widmer on Twitter. Hit me up on Instagram at Sean T. Widmer on Instagram. I would love that. And I always love the chatter on there, even if it's not related to the podcast. You can check out the show on YouTube, and it's there. Like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to it, hit the dingy arrow, whatever, all of the things they say for YouTube videos. And again, I appreciate everyone who listens to the podcast. Thank you so much. I hope your Tuesday is great.